Okay, 8th graders, this is your practice test 23 for this week, so make sure you take all your notes and do the problems with me and bring it into class tomorrow for your points, and then you'll have a test that's very similar. Okay, so we're going to take our paper and we're going to start with problem number 1, but I'm going to enlarge it so that I have a little bit more workspace and can write it out a little bit. So let's factor. Our numerator is going to become 4x minus 5 times 4x plus 5. And I knew that because of the no middle term rule that we learned. And we're multiplying it times this numerator here, which this guy has a 6 that can come out. So I'm going to pull out the 6, and I'm left with the x squared plus 5x minus 6. And I'll deal with factoring him in the next step. And then I have my denominator. So my first denominator is going to become x plus something and x minus something. So it has to multiply to make a negative 3 and add to make a positive 2. So a 3 and a 1 will work. And now in my next denominator, I have a 3x that can come out, and I am left with what am I left with? I would be left with a 4x minus 5. Okay, now I still have this one parenthesis right here that has to be factored again, so I'm going to go ahead and write everything that I have left in my numerator until I get to that point, and then I will factor him further. And so he's going to factor two binomials, and it will be x minus something and x plus something. So it has to multiply to make a negative 6 and add to make a 5. So I'm going to go with a 6 and a 1. And then my denominator we already have finished. So all we're going to need to do is look for our equivalent forms of 1. And so let's find equivalent forms of 1. Well, I have the 4x minus 5, and I have an x minus 1. And then I have this 3 and 6, so the 6 is going to become a 2. And it looks like that's all we have. So our final answer is going to be the quantity, well, 2 times the quantity 4x plus 5 times the quantity x plus 6. And it's being divided by the quantity of x plus 3 times by that x. And so we'll box our final answer. Okay, we're going to move on to the next problem, number 2. And this is a division problem, which means that we really multiply by the reciprocal. So I'm going to see if I can factor anything first and make it a little bit simple, and then I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal. So I can see that this denominator here has an x that can come out, and I would be left with x squared minus 9. And I know that that is really an x minus a 3 and an x plus a 3 because of the no middle term rule. Okay? And up in my numerator here, I can factor out a 6x. And so I'm left with an x minus a 4. Okay, so I factored out 6x and I'm left with x minus 4. And this denominator here is going to factor to be an x plus a 3 and an x minus a 2. And in my other numerator, it looks like I have a 2 that I can pull out. So I'd be left with x squared minus 6x plus 8. And now let's write our fraction, and let's change it to multiplication with the reciprocal. And this piece here I'm going to factor further. So I have 2 times the quantity x plus 2, x minus 4. Oh, that's wrong. It's going to be an x minus a 2 and an x minus a 4 to give us that positive 8. And it's going to be times this piece down here, x minus 3, x plus 3. And now my denominator is x plus 3, x minus 2, 6x, and an x minus a 4. And let's find our equivalent forms of 1. So I have an x minus a 4, I have an x. There's a 2 hidden in here, so that's gone. And I have an x minus a 2. Okay, so it looks like what I'm left with in my numerator is x minus 3. Oops, I missed one. X plus 3, x plus 3. So in my numerator I have an x minus 3, and in my denominator I have a 3. So this becomes my final answer. All right, let's move on to number 3. So there it is. We're going to simplify, which is the easy stuff. This is just where we're just factoring things out. So I'm going to factor out a 3x. And so if I pull out a 3x, I'm left with a 2x as my first term minus a 1. And my denominator, I can factor out a 3. So I'm left with x squared minus 1, which that's that special middle term problem. So he really factors to an x plus 1, x minus 1. And so I have 3x times 2x minus 1 over 3 times x plus 1, x minus 1. Okay, so I'm double checking myself and it looks like I've made a mistake. So this piece here, this denominator here is actually wrong. So I need to fix it. So this denominator is actually, if we factor out a 3, I'm left with a 4x squared minus 1. And that's going to factor further. And that's going to factor to the 3 times 2x minus 1, 2x plus 1. There we go. And now we have our equivalent form of 1 and an equivalent form of 1. So what I'm left with in my numerator is my x, and in my denominator 2x plus 1. And so this becomes my final answer. So let's move on to number 4. Let's shrink so I can find it. There it is, problem number 4. So solve the polynomial equation. That means we're looking for roots. So I'm going to factor out an x, and I get x plus 5 equals 0. And I set each piece equal to 0. And so I can see that x can either be a negative 5 or x can be 0 in order to solve this problem. Okay, let's look at number 5. This is one of those word problems. Find the integer whose square is 8 less than 6 times itself. Okay, so we're looking for a number that when we square it, so some number squared is, which means equals, 8 less than 6 times itself. So 6 times itself minus 8. And now we're going to set it equal to 0, and we would have a negative a squared plus 6a minus 8. Of course, we never want that negative on the a, so we're going to factor out or divide everything by negative 1 or multiply everything by negative 1. So I get 0 equals a squared minus 6a plus 8. And I can see that my a's would be my factors, my two binomials, has to multiply to make an 8 and add to make a negative. So I should have a minus 4 and a minus 2. And now I'm going to set them both equal to 0. So I would have 0 equals a minus 4 and 0 equals a minus 2. So a can be 4 or a can be 2. And these would be your two answers. Find the integer. But guess what? Let's double check it. Let's make sure they work. So if we square, the square is 8 less than 6 times itself. So the square of 4 is 16. Okay, so is 16 8 less than 6 times itself? Well, 6 times 4 minus 8. Let's see if it works. 6 times 4 is 24 minus 8. Well, that makes 16. So 16 does equal 16. Now let's try our 2. So 2 squared is 4. Now we have to do 6 times that 2 minus 8, which would be 12 minus 8. And 12 minus 8 is 4. So they are both solutions to this problem. Okay, let's look at our CST question. This is another factoring problem. And so I'm going to leave this one for you, but just remember that you're going to multiply by the reciprocal. So you have to change this guy up. Make sure you factor everything completely. Like I can see a 2 and an x to factor from that numerator. I can see a 2 and an x to factor from the denominator. Okay, I can see a special binomial times binomial without a middle term there. All right, finish this up and bring it to class tomorrow.